So something interesting to me, he said, and I made this point on my live stream yesterday, polls are one thing, but to me what's more important than polls is like what you see in the streets. It's kind of like in the general election, polls showed Hillary Clinton was beating Donald Trump, but all I saw was Donald Trump lawn signs when I was going around the country. Yep. So like those things matter. I mean, I just got here, but can you kind of describe like what you guys have been seeing? Iowa's big. I mean, we're only in Des Moines, but like, what is kind of the energy in the streets? Are you seeing a lot of Bernie signage? Are you seeing more organizers coming from you guys? I mean, just where you've been.
Yeah. So I've definitely seen a lot more organizers for Bernie than any other canvas, and part of that is obviously just that I'm here with the other volunteers. But I did have the very fortunate job of going around to deliver signs, which was a lot of fun. But we are really starting to overtake on those signs, and there is sort of a lot of energy. When I've been canvassing and going to just random doors, you find a Bernie supporter, and they're so excited. And it really is sort of a blessing in my mind, because a lot of us really, really care, and you can engage in these really awesome conversations that I haven't had the chance to have with some supporters of other presidential candidates. It feels like a lot in this to win, and I do feel like that energy really has shown through. Like, you can really see it.
And by the way, I forgot to mention, this is a super chat. If you're feeling super, I'm not looking at my phone, so I can't read your super chat, but we appreciate the support. I want to ask you about that. I mean, you don't have to blow up any people's spot, but like, I mean, I've been around the block, so I've interviewed some older folk that tend to be more like, we can't have nice things and, you know, electability and these things. What has been, in your experience, maybe you knock on a door of somebody who's a Biden supporter or Klobuchar or Pete, are they open to what you're describing, or are you getting a lot of that kind of older mentality of like, it's just not, you know, in my heart, yes, but we can't win with someone like that? And what is the rebuttal to that for you?
Sure. So I haven't seen it. I wouldn't say older. I've seen that a lot of elderly, more seasoned folks are pretty open to Bernie, in my experience. And again, I have a much smaller sample size, so I can't speak definitively.
You know, that's a good point. There's a lot of older progressives. There's a lot of older progressives, including in my audience. I shouldn't say older, but like you said.
Yeah. But I have not met a single person from a single campaign that isn't willing to support Bernie if he is the nominee. And same with all the Bernie folks. Everyone is willing to take on Trump. I think that is the biggest priority for everyone. There are some people that are obviously going to be resistant. And so usually what I talk to them about is that I do feel Bernie is the most electable. And my favorite statistic to use is we have a lot of districts, not actually in Iowa, but just across the country, that voted Obama, Trump. And Bernie is leading donations from those districts, and those are the voters that we lost. And so in that sense, he really is one of the best positions. But then you think about his grassroots army, you think about the fact that he is leading independents, he's leading Republicans, he won a lot of the Midwest last year. And so for me, I think the electability argument kind of falls away once I sort of engage with someone for 5 minutes and kind of go through my feelings on it. And then I really, really try and just go forward with climate change. A lot of voters here have been hit by climate change. I was from California growing up, and we got hit by climate change really hard. We used to have these wild thunderstorms. And then I guess when I was in 6th grade, I don't think there's been a single thunderstorm where I'm from, just right outside of San Francisco. And so it's very, very apparent, like there's not any more flying bugs when you are on the I-5. Like you used to be able to drive up and your windshield would just get covered with dead bugs, which of course is a little sad, but nowadays you won't even get a single bug. And so it's just obvious that climate is happening. I try and share that story, and then I really dive into Bernie is the climate candidate. He is consistently rated first when on the scorecards by Greenpeace and Sunrise Movement and a lot of the other organizations, and he's also been getting the endorsements from those organizations. And so usually when I go through that, anyone that's sort of concerned about electability or that he would turn off people, as I go through the statistics and then I really go into climate change, because everyone with a kid cares about climate change. Everyone that is a farmer cares about climate change. And it really is, I feel, one of the universal issues that a lot of people are worried about it. really is starting to affect people at a very local level. Like, you can just have a conversation that it's raining less or it's snowing. In Seattle, we had Snowmageddon last year, and it was something crazy. Like, we got almost 10 times the normal amount of snow per year in a single week period. It was sort of part of that big polar vortex. And so sort of with those statistics and with the climate change, a lot of the worries about electability I've found have sort of fallen away. And that doesn't necessarily mean they're right on Bernie, but they are much more willing to look at him not only in the general, but as a second choice for that realignment in Iowa that you were explaining earlier.
I wanted to ask you because, I mean, to me, all I hear about is electability. All I hear about is, like, socialism will never work, blah, 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 blah. But, like, I just saw an ad Bernie put out today, basically taking Donald Trump's words. He just said, like, yeah, I'll put entitlements and Social Security on the table. And, like, those ads don't come off like a scary boogeyman, a communist, like the Republicans are trying to make him, like Joe Biden will probably eventually start going the communism route. It just seems like somebody kind of out for the working man or woman. Are you seeing any, in your interactions, people like, oh no, you know, he's a socialism, because even people in my life, like older people I know, are like, oh yeah, if he makes the general, you know, they'll brand him as a communist and people won't elect a socialist. But that's not what I see. Even when I talk to non-Bernie supporters, they don't really view him as that.
The only time I've really experienced that was when it was someone that was already a Trump supporter. They said, I'm not going to vote for a socialist. And you kind of just say, okay, well, thank you for your time and I'm going to go. But kind of going to one of the points I originally made, every single person I've canvassed, whether they're Biden, Yang, Tulsi, Steyer, or whatever, has not had like a shred of hesitation behind or about getting behind Bernie when he is the nominee. I think that's just not an issue people really care about. I think people seem to be kind of done with all these labels, and you just really start engaging on policies. You talk about how we can help improve your life, how we can really bring some climate justice into our world, and yeah, people just aren't like, you don't need to engage on a label, and people aren't really worried about that label, at least from what I've seen. And again, small sample size. I haven't talked to everyone in Iowa. But yeah, I haven't seen it to be an issue at all.
And you talked about you quit your job in Seattle, came down here. Obviously, there's stakes involved for you. You don't just quit your job and drive halfway through the country. Talk about your life, whatever you're comfortable sharing. What's inspiring you about Bernie, his movement, that made you want to give up your job and come here?
Yeah. Well, I just think that Bernie is going to be the best way to end a lot of unnecessary suffering. And I think that's really important to me. I had grown up in San Francisco, and just a lot of my friends were put into really unfortunate situations. Their parents lost their jobs. Their parents had to move. These parents didn't do anything wrong. They didn't make mistakes. And it was really unfortunate. And then when you look at like the UN report that's saying we have less than 5 years, I see that as we have one presidency to actually do something about climate change. Like, we're starting to hit these feedback loops. We see it in Australia, we see it in Brazil, we see it in California. We're having these massive wildfires, which are releasing more carbon, which is going to make it hotter, which is going to make it drier, which is going to lead to another fire. And these feedback loops, I think there's something like 16 that are like well acknowledged and defined in the community. And if we hit those to a point where we basically start falling down the slippery slope, then there is not going to be much recourse for us. We are going to get stuck in this cycle of trying to fix what's been broken by a hurricane or by a fire and not be able to put money into actually addressing the problem, into decarbonizing our infrastructure. And so we really need to do it now, or we are going to lose control of this loop. And so for me, it really is like, we need to get out there and we need to get Bernie elected so that we can save the planet. And then you look at all of his other policies and it's like, yes, these are all awesome and great. And one of my favorite things, and this isn't quite as much of a policy, but he really does talk about using the U.S. military not only to draw down their carbon, but to use them almost as a force of peace. And there's some crazy statistic where I think if you counted the military as a country, it's like top 5, top 10 carbon producers.
top one. The United States Pentagon is the biggest contributor to carbon emissions on planet Earth.
Yeah, and so that is insane. And I think if we have a chance to save the climate, every country needs to do something, but the U.S. has so much more to do. I think per capita we have twice as much emissions as any other. I think China is the next closest, and we are twice as much as them per capita. And so even while they are creating a lot more emissions, they're still developing and they have way, way more people. But I think we have a lot more potential to really draw down our carbon and make that big impact. And so I think like the climate justice needs to not necessarily start in America, but America needs to be a powerhouse in that movement.
I'll let you get back. One last question.
Yeah.
I kind of want to take the audience like inside a little bit. Jamal, if you could pan a little bit to show them. Like, can you kind of talk about like what goes on here? Is there like a meeting in the morning among volunteers? Like this is the talking point today, or we need to focus on this today? You know, what's the camaraderie like? I assume most people are working like round the clock, some double shifts, some are phone banking for a few hours, then they're going out. Like, what is a day like here, or is every day pretty different?
Every day is definitely different, but the camaraderie is strong. Like, you talk to a single person for the first time and you're already friends, which has been really, really awesome. But for me as a volunteer, I guess the first day I got here, they just immediately sent me out canvassing. So you come in and there's someone that will tell you what to do, and you download an app and you sort of go through the, we sort of have like a script of saying like, just trying to draw out voters. And then some days I was going through and phone banking, and on the weekdays we have less canvassing shifts, obviously, because people are, well, might not be obvious, but a lot of people are not home. And so we might be phone banking, but a lot of the times I would end up making yard signs or just finding some way to be useful, cleaning, because it really is sort of like if I'm not doing it, then one of the staff might have to do it. And so it is sort of finding any odd job that you can do if you're not out canvassing. But the last few weeks have been really awesome while I've been here, because we've been getting out-of-state volunteers, and so we'll have like 20 people come in from Chicago, excuse me. I think they were with an organization called Mikva, which was all about just getting young people into politics. But there's all these groups coming in, and we're getting them out to canvass, we're getting them to phone bank, and we're just finding if they're not comfortable doing either of those, we'll have them build signs, we'll find something that they can do. Like, everyone has a skill that they can contribute.
I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I want to know from people. Progressives were very dejected in 2016. Like, what do you even imagine? Like, if Bernie Sanders wins on Monday night, like, what do you imagine that room being like? Headquarters, field offices being like? I mean, joy would be like an understatement, but like, what do you think the feeling would be? Like, because, I mean, progressives have had some wins, like AOC was victorious. You've had lower level progressive candidates victorious, you know, attorney generals, district attorneys. But like, if Bernie Sanders were to win the Iowa caucus, it's kind of a statement that like, it's not over, but like, they say the walls are closing in on Trump. Like, that would begin a real sign to the establishment that, you know, your time's soon approaching. What are your thoughts on what it would be like?
You know, I've tried to imagine it, and it's hard to imagine. But like right now, we're 4 days out from the caucus, and there's so much electricity in the air. Like, you can really feel the excitement and the energy. And I think it has you just slowly been progressing. Like, everyone is really, really excited. We're having Bernie signs go up everywhere. And so when I do think about like what is that win on caucus night going to be, I think it's just going to be absolutely crazy. Everyone is going to be so excited, because when we win Iowa with like a good percentage, that's going to make the rest of the fight much easier. I think because we're doing so well in New Hampshire, we're doing so well in Nevada, we're doing well in Texas, as you said earlier, we're doing well in California. We have the infrastructure set up to take advantage of the momentum that we're going to get in Iowa. And so I think because we've all been working so hard, and there's staff members in the room right behind me that have been working day to day, just constant hours. And I think there's just been this sort of boiling of pressure of excitement. And I think that night when we win, there is going to be an explosion of hype and just love. Like, I think we all are. We've like Bernie talks about solidarity a lot, but you do feel that solidarity when you're here, and I think there is that almost an electric solidarity that people are ready to celebrate because we put in the work and we are going to win. So,
hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.